Hello, I'm Anthea Chilton and I'm one of the sector learning and development leads at the Housing Ombudsman Service. I'm here with Stephen Parfitt and Stephen's one of our adjudicators and we're here today to talk about a particular case that was brought to us to investigate. But before we get going, Stephen, would you like to introduce yourself and explain a bit about your role here at the Housing Ombudsman?
Yes, certainly. So, as you said, my name is Stephen Parfitt. I'm one of the adjudicators here at the Housing Ombudsman Service, and I'm based within the dispute resolution team. What that means is it's my job to investigate complaints that have been brought to the service that have exhausted the landlord's internal complaints process. I basically go through all of the evidence provided by both the landlord and the resident, work out what happened and determine whether the landlord followed its policies and procedures or not, and make an ultimate finding for the resident on their complaint.
Brilliant. Thank you, Stephen. So could you share a little bit about the background of the case that we're going to be talking about and perhaps some of the events that led up to the complaint?
This was quite a complex, long-running complaint and issue, all revolving around multiple leaks. So the resident first reported a leak back in 2019 that was affecting a home, which was a flat within a tower block. She contacted her MP, who then contacted the landlord about this. As she said, she'd contacted them previously and had had no response. The landlord then took some action. It checked for a leak from a property above, said that it found one and repaired it fairly promptly. Unfortunately, 2 months later, the resident reported a leak again. The landlord again went out, said it had found another leak and repaired that. It also said it found some asbestos floor tiles in her kitchen, which had been water damaged by the leak. Unfortunately, then, there are no records between September 2019 and August 2021, which is a very long period of time not to have any information at all. But by August 2021, the resident said that she'd been consistently chasing the landlord about various leaks in the property and remedial works due to the water damage. She also said she'd made some formal complaints, but the landlord appeared to have no record of any of this at all. By September 2021, the landlord found another leak, this time on the soil stack, which is actually the main sewage pipe that runs through the entire block. So it's a pretty serious leak containing wastewater and sewage. Unfortunately, they also found some asbestos in a cupboard in the resident's property, which was the area where the leak was coming through. And they said they needed to deal with the asbestos before they could then tackle the leak. The resident made a stage 1 complaint to the landlord because she said she was at her wit's end. She actually said she was feeling suicidal, and wrote quite a sort of descriptive email to the landlord about how all of this situation had been affecting her over a long period of time. She wasn't happy with the conditions she was living in, and with the fact that there was sewage leaking into her home. She stopped paying the rent at this point and literally said, "I want you to take me to court so that I can bring a disrepair counterclaim," because she really was at the end of her tether at this point. In its stage 1 response, the landlord said that it would arrange for the asbestos check for the area where the leak was, so it could then go on to tackle the leak, and it offered £50 in compensation for the distress caused. Naturally, the resident decided to escalate the complaint because she was dissatisfied with the stage 1 response. Sometime later, one of the housing officers working for the landlord was tasked to call the resident about her rent arrears because they were quite large by this point. However, that housing officer actually noted on the records that he couldn't bring himself to ask her for payment due to the conditions of the property, and actually urged the landlord himself to urgently do something about the condition of the property. In its stage 2 response in June 2022, the landlord said it was finding it difficult to trace the leak as it was difficult to find leaks in tower blocks. But he did offer £450 in compensation for the inconvenience and distress caused. By October 2022, the leak was still ongoing. And the resident at this point went to her doctor because she said it was affecting her mental and physical health. And the doctor actually provided a letter to the landlord. The situation was also affecting the health of her daughter as well, which obviously she had real concerns for because of the situation in the bathroom with the ongoing leak. The landlord accepted that there were several leaks by December 2022 and agreed to decant, which is to temporarily move out to an alternative property, the resident, and this was agreed. The resident left the property in December and then moved into to stay with family and then moved into the decant from March 2023. At the date I determined the complaint, the resident was still in that decant property and was saying that she really did not want to return to the property because of the impact it had on her physical and mental health, and her feeling that it had been going on for so long, she wasn't entirely convinced that the issue had been resolved.
Brilliant. Thank you, Stephen. That's a really good overview of the case. And it sounds like a really complex case with lots of different sort of aspects that would have had a real impact on the physical and mental health of the residents. So when you were looking at all of that, what kind of determinations did you make when you looked at the case?
So after reviewing all of the evidence and going for everything, and including speaking with the resident as well, I made a determination of severe maladministration for the landlord's handling of the leak and the resulting water damage to the property. I also made a finding of maladministration for the way the landlord handled the complaints, and additionally we considered, and I found a finding of maladministration for the landlord's knowledge and information management, which was how it kept its records and how it managed its information.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, I think the knowledge and information management is really important. Without that record keeping, it must have made it quite difficult to be able to investigate each of those instances. So what did you order or recommend the landlord to do to resolve that complaint?
So part of the orders consisted of a written apology. We always think it's important that the landlord accepts where things have gone wrong and apologises to the resident for this, as a way to try and sort of resolve or repair the landlord and tenant relationship. I also ordered compensation of £3,700 to be paid directly to the resident. It's important to note that the Ombudsman's approach is that compensation is always paid directly to the resident, not offset against any arrears or any other debts that they may have with the landlord. I also ordered the landlord to provide evidence of the works it carried out to the property to resolve all of the issues with the leaks and the asbestos, and to fully redecorate, and to provide evidence of the asbestos tests and any works carried out if any removal or capping was required, and for a date when the resident could return to the property. I also ordered the landlord to pay for the resident's personal possessions that had been water damaged, provided she could provide evidence of the items and their approximate value. Also ordered a complaint review for the landlord to fully review how it had approached the complaint and all the issues leading up to the complaint, so it could see for itself where things had gone wrong and where it could make improvements for the future, as well as a self-assessment against the recommendations made in the Ombudsman's Spotlight report on knowledge and information management. So again, it could see where it could make vast improvements to improve its record keeping and how it managed the information it was collecting or wasn't collecting.
Great, thank you, Stephen. So the landlord there has lots of different actions to sort of take forward to be able to resolve that complaint. How did the landlord do? So what did they do when they received those orders and recommendations? And what was positive about the landlord's response to the Ombudsman, to your investigation?
So the landlord fully accepted the outcome of the investigation, the adjudication and all of the orders made, and it fully complied with the orders made within the time frame we set for them to comply. They actually provided a detailed and sincere apology letter 2 weeks after the determination was issued, which was 2 weeks earlier than it had to comply. So they were very sort of quick to make sure they acknowledged that there had been failings and to apologise for them in a meaningful way. They confirmed that they had completed all of the repairs and provided reports to show the works that had been carried out and the sort of completion and sign-off reports, which again was very positive. They reviewed their policies under the case review and made 11 recommendations for changes they already had made or would make, and also provided new training for staff on complaints handling. Accepted that its relationship with the resident had broken down and wanted to repair this in a meaningful way. To do this, they arranged a meeting with the resident. The resident explained that she really did not want to return to the property for the reasons that I've outlined earlier. The leak had been going on for a long time. It was finally resolved. Worked out that it was sewage causing the leak. The sort of effects on the resident's mental health meant that she really didn't want to return to the property. So the landlord arranged this meeting fully discussed all of this with her. The outcome of the meeting, which came as a complete surprise to both the resident and to myself, was that the landlord actually agreed to write off her rent arrears, which by that point had amassed to £8,400. They also agreed to offer her a direct move to a different suitable property in an area that was suitable for her. Two things which obviously we hadn't and couldn't have ordered them to do. It also reminded the resident to provide details of her personal possessions that were damaged so that he could pay for these on several occasions, to show that he hadn't forgotten that he needed to comply with that order as well. The tone of the landlord's emails was genuine. It was accommodating and it was helpful. This was something the resident had previously complained about, the way in which the landlord had dealt with her and his communications with her. And so this approach was really something that was making a real impact on the resident relationship with the landlord. She felt like she was being heard, she was being taken seriously, and they actually cared about resolving all of her issues for her, which really did have a positive impact on her. In one of the emails which the landlord sent in as showing their compliance from the resident wrote she was actually overwhelmed with joy. And that she could finally start to live her life again. It really had made such a difference, the way the landlord had gone from having such bad findings made against them to really turning it around and really making this resident finally feel like she was valued, and really having a positive view of her landlord after all that time was quite remarkable.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. That's really positive to hear, all of those different aspects that all of those actions that the landlord took on board, and particularly the phrase where you said the resident said she was overwhelmed with joy. I think that's really saying something when it was such a complex and the case and the issues with it had such a detrimental impact on the residents' physical and mental health. That really is quite a turnaround to be able to say that the resident felt and using the tone of emails as well, and showing that empathy, helping the resident to feel valued and have that positive feeling towards the landlord after all of that, and particularly as well having that direct move. And that's not something that we can or had ordered the landlord to do, so they've kind of gone that bit extra and decided to move the resident as well, which is great. So thank you for sharing that. So the last question I have for you, Stephen, then is what could other landlords learn from this example? So this particular landlord had obviously made lots of really positive changes and had clearly learnt from this example. So what could other landlords do, and what could they learn from it?
Well, first of all, it's all about communication, and this comes up time and time again in the cases that I investigate here for the Ombudsman. It's often about how the landlord speaks to the resident, how it communicates, how responsive it is, how understanding and solution focused, how willing it is to engage with the issues and with the individual resident as an individual and try and resolve those. Admittedly, and quite rightly, every landlord has its policies and procedures, and we fully expect them to follow those. But it's about applying those policies and procedures in a way that actually works with the situation and with the resident, and being very open and honest about when it can and can't do things, but also treating that person as an individual as they rightly are. So yeah, it's about the personal approach. Now, in this case, that didn't happen before the complaint, but it really did afterwards, and it really showed the landlord had picked up on what had gone wrong and how to resolve it. And that made a real difference in its approach and the effect this had on the resident. It's the little things like having an individual named member of staff take ownership of the complaint and then say things like, I'll personally liaise with this department or that, or I will follow this up, and then delivering on that promise so that the resident doesn't feel like they've just been put into a big machine and they're a small cog, but actually their complaint is real and important, and someone really is dedicating their time to resolve it and make sure that everything works in the end and the outcome is positive. And I can't emphasize enough how much that really makes a difference through the casework that I do, seeing that approach in action. It's also about using the term think outside the box, but that's absolutely what the landlord did in this case. As you rightly said, we didn't order them to write off the rent arrears, and we didn't, and we can't order a landlord to move a resident or to let them to a particular property. That's something we can't do. Yet the landlord here recognised the sheer impact this situation had on the resident, and of their own volition offered to make a direct offer to an alternative property for this resident, which, as we said, overwhelmed her with joy. It really did solve the issue, and not only that, but take away any anxiety that the issue could come back, that there could be further leaks or further asbestos. She didn't have to worry about that anymore because she wasn't going to be there, and that really did have a massive and positive effect. So, whilst appreciating it's not always possible for a landlord to offer such a move, I think sort of the highlight really is thinking about other ways that complaints can be resolved and that relationship with a resident can be rebuilt, above and beyond any orders that the Ombudsman has made, really has a positive effect. Also particularly impressed about its approach to compensation for the resident's personal possessions. The resident had told us that she'd had many possessions water damaged, and particularly her flooring, the decoration she had done to the property on multiple occasions to then have further leaks damage them. The landlord took a very positive approach in simply saying, provide us with details of what it was, and we will compensate for it. And that's such a brilliant approach. Unfortunately, sometimes within casework and after orders are made, we see landlords directing residents towards their insurance company or for a long, drawn-out process, which really isn't what they should be doing. So this is a very positive approach the landlords take, and sort of commend it upon any other landlords in a similar position to really help resolve that situation for the resident by paying the compensation that's due, and then if there's any internal or insurance processes that needs to be done, then for them themselves to take that on in the background so the resident isn't unduly affected by that. I think the sort of headline for all of this is that even if it looks like the landlord-tenant relationship has completely broken down and is beyond all reprieve, it's not. It can be brought back. The landlord can make positive changes and positive decisions that restores that relationship with the resident. It's the ultimate goal of the Ombudsman that landlords learn from complaints, and this complaint I think really demonstrates that the landlord learned from the complaint outcome what had gone wrong and did everything it possibly could to put things right, and the result was that the resident was happy, and above all else that's what we strive for is happy residents. So this was a real good example for all landlords out there to sort of heed really, in that relationship can be saved.
Thank you very much, Stephen. There's a lot there that landlords can take from this particular case, and it's clear that this landlord has learnt a lot from the complaint and made a lot of changes. But your point there about the key to this particular case, and the key learning there is about communication, and thinking about how, as a landlord, the landlord speaks to the resident, and giving that personal approach. And I think it ties in really nicely with our most recent Spotlight report on attitudes, respects and rights, and the relationship of equals. But thank you very much, Stephen, for sharing that case with us, and we'll take that forward and share the learning to other landlords. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.